What is the most god-awful noise you've ever heard? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. May 3rd, 1999, Oklahoma City. We were in the center of the house in the bathroom when a tornado hit our house. There were many smaller tornadoes that spawned off the main storm that day. It sounded like a bomb going off. The entire house shuddered. The sound that my sis made when she heard our dog died, she screamed for a full-on 5 minutes, and she was only 10. She was crying for about a week. Sound of my mom in the middle of the night when she found out a daughter of a family friend had collapsed and died. I thought it was a wounded animal before I realized it was a level of grief I'd never heard before. When my son was 2, he took a really bad fall that basically resulted in a hole in his face. He hit his face on the edge of a chair. I was just waking up. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. My husband was up with the kids and they were playing. All of a sudden I hear a loud thud and then silence. If you're a parent, you know that is never good. Then a scream, the likes of which I never heard, and then just continued screaming. It was awful. Several hours in the emergency room and 18 stitches later, he was put back together again. By some miracle, he did no damage to his teeth. Yes, gums absolutely do bruise, and has only the slightest scar. Mad props to the PA at the hospital who stitched him up. I was homeless, camping in a field. At night, I'd see snowy white owls gliding silently overhead hunting rabbits. One night, I heard the most awful screaming from a young rabbit that got picked up and carried off, screaming and fading off into the distance. The most awful, terrible, dying agony I ever heard from an animal. If I hadn't seen the owls while lying on my back looking up at the stars, I never would have figured out what that was. I work in a pediatric ICU. There have been gut-wrenching screams from parents that no one should ever have to hear. Sound of a wife finding out her husband had passed on her way to the ER. When the doc told her, she collapsed to her knees and wailed, a sound of loss so profound while weeping at the foot of the doctor. The doctor was affected, but as the head of the ER, he kept on going. It really was a superhero moment in my eyes, even though there was tragic loss. The sound of a hand going through a metal roller between the roller and a rope. I was a naval medic and was stood beside the guy as the fingers and hands went through and then had to assist as we pulled it back out again, so I got to hear the bones crunching twice. Someone crying when their insides were spilling out onto the road. Not the first person I've seen die, but it's been over a decade and still occasionally have nightmares about that noise. A cat crawled inside the engine of my dad's car, and nobody knew it was there until the engine was started and the cat got crushed. The sound that made was the thing of nightmares. Last year, my son was hospitalized with staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, and he was in so much pain he lost his voice from crying and screaming, but still kept crying and screaming when the pain was too much for him. It was the most horrendous sound I've ever heard in my life, and it was the saddest thing we have gone through as a family. He was like that for 3 days, and then the treatment started helping, and he slept for a very long time. He's 100% better now. Good. I had to tell a mother that her toddler had been hit and killed by an SUV backing out of the driveway. The sound she made will haunt me forever. I don't miss being a cop. The screams from my dog when she woke up from surgery. She was having dysphoria and didn't know what was going on. It lasted far too long and was really awful. But basically, anytime I've heard something or someone screaming in pain, it's just awful to hear. It's a toss-up between a gas distribution facility exploding or hedgehogs having sex. Probably the latter, as it sounds like a baby being murdered. He adds, they're loud, louder than foxes, and that's a high bar to cross. My 2-year-old daughter crying and saying, ouchie, 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 over and over while my wife and I had to pin her down to get an IV from a nurse who didn't know how to insert an IV, actively participating in causing pain to a person that my entire existence is instinctively to protect was heart-wrenching, particularly since she didn't understand why mommy and daddy were hurting her. She's 6 and still remembers it. Had to excuse myself to the urgent care hallway afterwards to decompress, and the nurse who effed up was in the hallway quietly crying. Probably the worst day of my life, and I've had some shitty ones. Chewing with one's mouth open, lip smacking, or other loud eating sounds. I'm patient with a lot of things, but that's more than I'm willing to deal with. I'm with you. When my daughter was born, there were some last-minute complications, and the minute and a half of silence from when they pulled her out until she cried, which confirmed that she was alive, was fucking horrifying. I live near a river. A young girl went missing while on the water. The sounds her family made when they pulled her dead body from the water was like nothing I've ever heard. Total meltdown and physical collapse vocalized. The sound of my old dog howling and sprinting around in pain in the middle of the night. We think she had a stroke because she went blind shortly afterwards, made the decision to put her down in the morning because her quality of life would have been just drastically diminished had we decided to hold on to her. Miss her to this day. Accidentally shutting my cat's paw in a door. I will never forget that yowl of pain and the guilt that ensued. I watched a child, 2 to 3 years old, fall down an escalator from pretty much the top as the mother didn't strap him in his buggy, and the cries from that little boy will haunt me forever. He hit nearly every step coming down, and the cries from the mother were horrific. While at university, I worked a weekend job as a janitor at a Taco Bell restaurant, and the sounds you hear coming from inside the toilet cubicles is nightmarish. A guy or woman would run into the cubicle shouting, "Oh God," slam the door, throw open the lid, and then you'd hear what sounds like a gassy artillery barrage going off and the sloshing and splashing of water, almost like a battleship firing its cannons into the ocean. Never had that problem with Taco Bell. I used to live below a very nice lady, a doctor no less, and she was always polite, well-spoken when I saw her. She used to practice classical guitar very badly and turn into the most foul-mouthed demon imaginable. The ceiling being paper-thin didn't help. The combination of terrible guitar playing and swearing became grating to me, and every single time I heard her pick that guitar up, my headphones went on to save my sanity. This was about 1.5 years ago during quarantine times. There was a fire in my apartment building, and my then girlfriend and I were evacuating down the stairs. On our way down, we heard something meow repeatedly, and not like a cat actually making cat noises. It sounded like a text-to-speech bot was saying meow. We assured it was some kid being weird, but after a while, a lady carrying her cat came outside, and the cat was actually just meowing like that. We were all stuck outside listening to that cat for like an hour. It was funny at first, but it very quickly turned awful, haunting even. A weird song I heard at the end of Sleep Paralysis. I thought that was the sound of a demon flying away. Oh, it was so scary. The sound was like trucks' wheels suddenly breaking or one of World War II's planes. Another time, I woke up hearing strange voices, many of them, saying things I didn't understand. The sound of a turtle getting run over happened right in front of me. I was trying to get him out of the road when a truck just went over him. It sounded like a balloon popping, but a balloon made out of something hard. It was weird, because I swear that truck pulled closer to the curb the turtle was on. My very mentally ill neighbor having a loud argument with herself, which led to her getting a knife and a brick and breaking into the apartment beside the one I was living in order to attack the people living there. They jumped off their balcony to the ground a floor below and running off, and proceeded into breaking into my apartment, having lost the brick and, after being prevented from getting within stabbing or slashing range, throwing everything in my living room from hell to breakfast. My mom called me to tell me my sister died and then screamed animalistic into the phone. I couldn't even figure out who died or what was going on for a solid 2 minutes. When my roommate was throwing a frisbee with our dog Maya, she jumped for one and let out the worst noise I've ever heard as she landed on her butt. She continued to scream as she spun around on the ground with half front, half. We got to her, and there was blood near her lady bits, so we figured she came down on a branch or something and got punctured, and the pain caused her ass end to go limp. 4 hours and 2 emergency vets later, it turns out she had an FCE, fibrocartilaginous embolism, and the blood was unrelated to that specifically. It was from a lipoma that ruptured when she landed right on it. It's been just about 6 months since it happened, and I still have that awful sound stuck in my head. And in case you're wondering, Maya has recovered to about 80 to 90% functionality in her rear legs, but her favoritist hobby of doing massive jumps for frisbees is over, unfortunately, which kinda works out, as we've since moved to a place without a fence, so she can't play off leash anyway. Silence of a toddler was ran over with the background of her mom wailing when she realized she was dead while we were trying to save her in a parking lot. As a mom, I'm always relieved now when my kids are crying when they're injured. I know they're at least okay and I can help. Probably the sound of my stepdad choking my 9-year-old sister because she dropped the TV in her room. I didn't do shit about it, and it haunts me. My mom begging him to stop, my other sisters crying, and the silence of the one being choked. Now that I think about it, his footsteps were pretty fucking bad too. The slamming at the door at night when he'd gone home, and the yelling of goddamn every 5 seconds. I'm okay, but I can't say the same for those sisters. They were my step-siblings, and my mom finally had enough and got me and her out of there. Abuse is no joke.